Yeah, this storm is on the move right now. They say it's moving at about 50 miles per hour northeast at the moment. In addition to the tornado watches we have in the area, a tornado warning is in effect right now for north central Fauquier and central Loudoun County. That's until 5:15. So coming up in about 10 minutes. So stay safe. Hopefully the storm rolls through without doing much damage, but we'll see. We'll keep you updated here on WMAL. In the meantime, you can join us today on the program at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. NBC's Dasha Burns doing an interview with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis this week, and this is what that sounded like.
A chief concern, the 6-week abortion ban DeSantis signed in Florida. It's an issue Democrats have worked to use against him and other Republicans on the campaign trail. The governor has implied the issue should be left to individual states.
So would you veto any sort of federal bill that tries to put a nationwide ban in place?
So we will be a pro-life president, and we will support pro-life policies. I would not allow what a lot of the left wants to do, which is to override pro-life protections throughout the country, all the way up really until the moment of birth in some instances, which I think is infanticide.
Well, actually, I got to push back on you on that, because that's a misrepresentation of what's happening. I mean, that 1.3% of abortions happen at 21 weeks or higher.
But their view is that all the way up into that, yet there should not be any legal protections.
There is no indication of Democrats pushing for that.
There is no indication of Democrats pushing for that, she said, without citing any source whatsoever. For more on this, let's go to Curtis Houck. He's a managing editor over at NewsBusters, and I think he just busted this news today. Curtis, thank you very much for joining us.
Good to be with you as always, Vince.
All right, so Dasha Burns just insists that there is no Democrat who thinks that a child should be aborted all the way up until the moment of birth. What is the verdict here?
Well, first of all, that's not true at all. I mean, first, you also have to talk about the 1.3% of abortions are late term is her one argument in that soundbite. So the Guttmacher Institute, which, this abortion group, what most people think is a good benchmarker of the number of abortions, the most recent year we have is 2020. There was 930,160 abortions, meaning she's suggesting about 12,100 babies being murdered in the womb. What's the big deal? Number one. That's basically like, oh, well, by the 60s, only one person got lynched in Alabama. What's the big deal?
Yes.
Obviously.
And by the way, the Guttmacher Institute, which you just cited, again, they're basically the data gathering arm of Planned Parenthood. They're abortion enthusiasts. But one of the pieces of data that they gathered a couple years back is that these late-term abortions, the majority of them are healthy babies, healthy mothers. It is not basically, we're doing it for the life of the mother or the life of the child or whatever. It has nothing to do with that, it turns out, according to the Guttmacher Institute.
I should just add, 10 years ago, I came here to Washington, D.C. for the first time, and I interned with the MRC, and I was sent to a lot of these press conferences on the Hill, and one of them was a Planned Parenthood group, gathering rally with Cecile Richards and Al Franken when he was in the Senate at the time, and that was what their sob stories were. They were like, we need late-term abortions because, babies, end up with their umbilical cords wrapped around their neck 5 times, and so we need to keep late-term abortions for this reason. And you're like, that just sounds like a complete crock. But no, and she says that there's no evidence of Democrats pushing for abortions. And she said there's a misrepresentation, and that's not true at all. I mean, first of all, the bill that failed in Congress last year to codify Roe v. Wade wouldn't have done any of that. It would have allowed abortions to take place up to, quote, prior to fetal viability if determined necessary by healthcare providers. It had 51 votes in the Senate, every Democrat except Joe Manchin, and it had 218 Democratic votes in the House. So federally, that's not true at all. Right. And, as somebody who watches the White House press briefing, Peter Doocy and others have asked Karine Jean-Pierre, I'm guessing probably Philip Wegman has as well, and a few others, I'm sure I'm leaving out. They've asked Karine Jean-Pierre, when does President Biden believe abortion should go up until? And she refuses to answer these questions, and it's just all about, like, codifying Roe. What does that mean? That's a very esoteric cop-out.
They don't want to answer the question. Should anything be done to save the child?
So then you go to the state level.
Let me play an example for you, and then we'll get into some of these states, because we've got plenty of examples to draw upon. DeSantis' team, in reaction to all of this, put out a supercut of all these Democrats saying exactly what you're saying here, Curtis, which is no limits on abortion whatsoever. Listen.
Do you support any restrictions on abortion?
I don't. I've always believed...
Even in the third trimester?
Do you think there should be any limitation on abortions?
No, I do not.
Where it's obvious that a woman is about to give birth. She has physical signs that she is about to give a birth. Would that still be a point at which she could request an abortion if she was so certified?
My bill would allow that, yes.
Do you believe that a woman should be able to terminate a pregnancy up until the moment of birth?
Look, I think that happens very, very rarely, but at the end of the day, I believe that the decision over abortion belongs to a woman and a physician.
My question was about any limits to abortion at any point. You know, late term, anything?
You got to leave it up to the woman.
Up till now, my understanding is there wasn't a limit on when in pregnancy a woman could receive an abortion. Have you set any limit on it?
There are no limits.
No limits, Curtis Houck, and I guarantee you there's a lot more audio than that.
I mean, yeah, again, this is just completely false. I mean, Dasha Burns, the bigger point here, we should say, Vince, is this is a clear attempt to get back in the good graces of her bosses and her friends for her John Fetterman interview. That interview single-handedly almost caused John Fetterman to lose that race. She made him look like a complete fool. She asked him basic questions. She pointed out that you need this computer to you need this teleprompter in order to be able to answer questions, and even then you can't really answer questions. So this was clearly an attempt to get back to it, and I encourage listeners to go look at the actual clips, because when she's pushing back against DeSantis and throwing all these lies up, she's looking down at her notes the whole time. She's not looking at DeSantis in the eye and saying this. She's looking down and reading directly from her notes. So that tells you a little bit about, her agenda and what she had planned for this interview.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I remember when Dasha Burns did that interview with John Fetterman and then was explaining it, I believe it was the Today Show, where she laid out what had happened in the interview, and she was basically saying he's incapable of speaking without the assistance of a computer, that she was just stunned by how limited his ability to communicate was. And the reaction to her committing an act of journalism was swift and fierce. There was a lot of aggression directed at her for daring to tell the truth, and she was basically warned not to do it again.
Yeah, she was run out of town, almost, and it was surprising that NBC even kept her after this. Well, now here we go. This is exactly why. She's really redeeming herself, I guess, with this interview. But again, she just was completely devoid of facts. And this is what the left does, Vince. You see this with Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. They just say there's no evidence. There's no evidence. There's no evidence. And they hope that it'll just go away. Just because you say something doesn't mean it's true. Although with Democrats and the media, they can try and will things into existence because they know once certain narratives are formed, it's hard to get off of it.
It is amazing, though. I mean, look, if you were an honest reporter and you wanted to tap into the source material, the amount of extremism on display by mainstream Democrats is unbelievable. For instance, the former governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam, in an interview with a local radio station, said this about if a baby survives an abortion, here's what should happen. Take a listen to this.
There are, when we talk about third trimester abortions, these are done with the consent of obviously the mother, with the consent of the physicians, more than one physician, by the way. And it's done in cases where there may be severe deformities. There may be a fetus that's non-viable.
By the way, again, a lie. Majority of these births are healthy women, healthy babies.
So in this particular example, if a mother is in labor, I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired. And then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mother.
One of the most horrifying answers an American politician has ever given on infanticide and his endorsement of it. But there you go. If you're looking for an extreme position, boy, I think we found one, Curtis.
And then this was the thing. The Democrats said, there's no evidence. That's not what he's saying at all. Well, then you tell me what he is saying, because I'm pretty sure that's not very ambiguous. That's not very generic or esoteric. He's very specific about his views with abortion. He's very graphic in terms of stating what he believes should be the case.
And he's a pediatrician,
abortion.
by the way. That guy is, in addition to being a governor, he's a child's doctor.
Exactly. Now, we mentioned the states here. Just 3 recent examples here. We have Maine, who just, I believe, last week or 2 weeks ago, the AP says, quote, the bill would allow abortions at any time if deemed medically necessary. Oh, my gosh. In Minnesota, much the same thing. It codified women's protection. Okay, well, whatever does that mean? It would prevent, the state legislature from really pushing back on and implementing any weak limit on abortions. Mm-hmm. And then in Colorado, last year, Alexandria Sanctus-Mar, their National Review, wrote last year regarding Colorado, the bill appears to guarantee the right to any form of abortion at any stage of pregnancy for any reason. And Guttmacher has also known that there are currently 26 states that allow abortion for one reason or another at 20 weeks or later. I mean, again, there's no other way around this. And one final number for Dasha Burns out there, 60% of Democrats support abortion under any circumstances at any time. And Gallup has been measuring support among, Democrats, Independents, and Republicans since the 70s. And it's at the highest it's ever been. If you look it up, it's just this huge incline among support for Democrats. And it's 60%. That's not just like a plurality or a bare majority. A healthy, strong majority, no pun intended, believe in abortion under any circumstance at any time.
It's amazing, isn't it? So finally, I see DeSantis out there making the argument correctly that the extremist position here is the one that allows for so much child death. Why aren't more conservatives making the forceful arguments here? Because I can tell you, projecting forward to the next election, the Biden administration doesn't have anything to run on. They don't have a positive message to run on, so they're going to run on fear-mongering about their opponents, whether it's trying to treat Trump as a criminal into the general election by using the levers of the Justice Department in order to pursue that talking point, or to run on, Republicans are robbing women of choice. This is, of course, the argument that they're constantly making. Why is it so hard for conservatives to stick their head up, people who believe in defending life, who share the opinion of so much of the public, especially with regards to these late-term abortions? Why is it so hard for conservatives to stand up and just express that?
Well, there's 2 things. One, they feel like they got burned in the midterm election, so they can't talk about it. No, it needs to be framed in such a way. You need to explain that this is not, Handmaid's Tale. You need to push back on some of the insanity that's going on here. And 2, you can't just be singularly focused on fighting the deep state. Yes, the deep state is probably one of the top issues for voters, probably after the economy. We have 319 minutes so far measured at the MRC. A story I'm writing up now versus only 8.5 minutes on Devon Archer. So 319 on Trump versus 8.5 on Devon Archer. Big
Classic.
Story. Yeah. But when it comes to abortion, this is a real issue. And you can't cede this issue to Gavin Newsom, for goodness sake. You can't cede that to his wing of the Democratic Party or Barbara Lee.
Yes.
You cannot outsource this at all. And conservatives just need to grow a spine. And DeSantis touched on this in the Jake Tapper interview. He noted he would be a pro-life president while also recognizing that he's not going to jam through measures that aren't going to pass Congress. He will fight for, life in this country. But he noted that in a divided Congress, things like a 6-week abortion, limit in Florida just isn't going to happen.
Yeah. It's amazing, though. 1 million lives are on the line, and I think some people are holding their finger up and going, "Well, what are the politics of how I answer this question?"
They're afraid of what Jim Acosta or Joy Reid is going to say, and I mean, it's just spineless.
Yeah. Thank you very much, as always, Curtis Houck over at NewsBusters. Thank you for tracking the lies and rebutting them so efficiently. I really appreciate your time, sir. Early last week, I was over on Fox. I was on a special report, and I mentioned, I was asked just the basics here about what I thought of the January 6th indictment that Jack Smith had handed down for Trump. And I said, this is a prosecution and persecution of the leading candidate for president against Joe Biden. That's plain and simple what it is. I didn't realize until later in the week, somehow I missed it, that the former president of the United States had shared it on Truth Social. He had shared my clip from from Special Report, which is nice. It's always nice. And of course, then I've got a lot of people yeah, go Vince. Yeah, you're right. This is, and people lamenting the state of our country. And so there you go. But one of the other things that's happened is I've been talking a lot about what's going on with Hunter Biden and how, like, clearly Joe Biden was involved in the family's business arrangements. And I'm getting lefties on social media go, that's not true. There's no evidence, blah, blah, blah. And it's like this nonsense that keeps coming out of the mouth of Democrat leaders and honestly, the gullible idiots who follow them. And we've got Devon Archer on the record this past week saying Joe Biden was absolutely essential to Hunter making cash. Take a listen to what Devon Archer told Tucker Carlson in an extended interview put out at the end of last week.
There's no corruption here at all. This is totally normal. Joe Biden had no role whatsoever in his son's business or knowledge of it. But
right.
That seems false.
Yeah, I think that's categorically false. I think
that's categorically false, he said. Now, how many Democrats have you heard go on TV and say Devon Archer said that Joe Biden wasn't involved at all? Here's Devon Archer saying that claim is categorically false.
But
right.
That seems false.
Yeah, I think that's categorically false. I think that he was aware of Hunter's business. He met with Hunter's business partners. You found a letter that illustrates that he knew me.
And he's thanking you. He's thanking you for his efforts.
So I think that was, I think
your efforts. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's not factually right.
That's not factually right, says Devon Archer, who, by the way, tended to hold back a bit on giving too many details, but every time push came to shove, he answered, and it never looked good for Joe. It never did at all. More coming up as we're looking at a very weaponized Department of Justice squaring off with the judge today. Judge Eileen Cannon in Florida demanding some answers from the Justice Department about why it seems they are just so corrupt. All ahead. Little island music for you today as we get hit by a thunderstorm. It's rolling through the area. Try and stay safe out there. I've got some updates coming for you. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. I do find it's about the mood that you're in. When it's cold out, just pretend like you feel warm. You can make it work. Hey, there are a variety of severe thunderstorm warnings going on in our areas. In our area, of course, tornado warnings as well. Watches. But I'm seeing here from the National Weather Service just minutes ago, they say a destructive severe, that's apparently a category, a destructive severe thunderstorm warning is currently centered over Prince William County in the city of Manassas, moving towards Fairfax County, city of Fairfax, and the city of Falls Church, they say. This is the National Weather Service. They say this storm will contain gusts up to 80 miles per hour. Head inside and take cover now. That's the National Weather Service. That was at 5:29 now, just over 6.5 minutes ago, tweeting that. So I would take that seriously as people are preparing for this storm to hit us in this area and is headed into the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. Let me jump back over to the news now for a moment, political news and the Injustice Department news, as it were. You've got the Biden administration pursuing and persecuting their political opponent in Donald Trump. And Jack Smith, the special counsel who's been leading the charge for Joe Biden, has filed a number of indictments against Trump and his associates. And when I say his associates, I mean like the help, his body man, this guy Walt Nauta, who is basically a glorified executive assistant, the body man for the former president of the United States, and also the maintenance worker at Mar-a-Lago. And he's trying to attack these guys for, he says nominally, for the mishandling of government documents, again, a document dispute with the Biden administration, and for the events of January 6th, where Donald Trump told people to be peaceful. That's what they're going after him for. And today, in the document case, the federal judge overseeing that case against President Trump, in the words of Fox News, delivered multiple blows to special counsel Jack Smith's efforts in a brief that Monday, that is today. Judge Eileen Cannon of the Southern District of Florida, who is presiding over the case stemming from a Miami grand jury's June indictment of Trump, denied the Department of Justice's request for sealed filings, that is, to keep things secret, striking 2 from the record. Cannon also requested additional information from prosecutors regarding the continued use of an out-of-state grand jury to investigate the case. Not one located in Florida. Instead, that grand jury, is in Washington, D.C. And so Cannon writes this today, quote, "The special counsel states in conclusory terms that the supplement should be sealed from public view to comport with grand jury secrecy. But the motion for leave and the supplement plainly fail to satisfy the burden of establishing a sufficient legal or factual basis to warrant sealing the motion and the supplement." Among other topics, as raised in the motion, the response shall address the legal propriety of using an out-of-district grand jury proceeding to continue to investigate and or to seek post-indictment hearings on matters pertinent to the instant indicted matter in this district, she said. So, in so many words, she's saying, I think you're going to have to justify why you're using a grand jury in Washington, D.C. to continue going after Trump and these guys when the case is here in Florida. What are you doing exactly? Why is that? And these are good questions. Now, if you're looking for more information on this, we should turn to Mark Levin, who's coming up, of course, within the next hour. You'll be able to hear more from him specifically. But Levin had one of Trump's former attorneys on Fox News over the weekend, James Trusty. And the two of them were talking about this very thing. Now, their analysis came ahead of Judge Eileen Cannon's filing today. And boy, it sure sounds like she either watched this or she's on the same wavelength. Take a listen.
It's a good point. I mean, look, you had a presiding judge in D.C. that had a case that suddenly became indicted in Florida. And I'm not saying that it was bad for the president that the case moved to Florida, but there's a lot of shenanigans in terms of grand jury usage. You know, you don't do a grand jury investigation for a year only to move it to another district unless there's more to the story. I'm concerned that some of those abusive behaviors we talked about played out in front of the grand jury in D.C., and so what Florida got was a much sanitized version of what was presented over the course of a year in D.C.
Start an investigation in a grand jury in one place and move it to another, which violates the rules of the Department of Justice. But there's a lot of reasons you can do that if you're really a sleazy prosecutor.
So Mark Levin, of course, is one of the most switched on attorneys in the country. And here you have a judge, Eileen Cannon, who clearly is also switched on. She's paying attention. She's going, what is going on here? You're doing this secretive grand jury stuff in D.C., and then the case is going on in Florida. What are you doing? What kind of abuse are you trying to get away with?
You feel you can get a better grand jury from your perspective in Washington, D.C. than in Florida? You're making a point, I'm reading between the lines here, that a lot of stuff took place in that grand jury in Washington, D.C., that the grand jury and the judge in Florida can't possibly know about. You talked about sanitizing that process. I assume some of that, I'm guessing, has to do with attorney-client privilege information and so forth. The reason I'm saying that is past people I have talked to that have faced this man, Smith, say that's exactly what he does. He pierces attorney-client privilege by hook or by crook, gets it in front of the grand jury. It's used in front of the grand jury. And now in this case, he's moved it to another grand jury. And so the grand jury in Florida and the judge in Florida don't know anything about it unless Trump's lawyers are good enough to raise it with them. Is that your point?
Yeah, I think that's right. Again, I think there's a lot to be looked into. Of course, the grand jury proceedings in general are one-sided, right? The old saying about the grand jury will indict a ham sandwich if a prosecutor asks them to. We understand that. We're not pretending that the grand jury should be like a full-blown trial. It's not. But when judges make historic decisions based on ex parte submissions, in other words, one-sided submissions that defense attorneys don't get to even challenge, to make history. And then, by the way, to avoid all appeals by rushing the witnesses in the grand jury right after they get the friendly ruling.
Yes.
I mean, all of that smells rotten to me. And I think it's the type of stuff that will hopefully be brought to the attention of Judge Cannon or Judge Chutkan, depending on what the specific issue is in Florida or in D.C.
Okay. Mark Levin, James Trusty this weekend on Fox going through all of the ways in which this seems to be a very abusive process. Being conducted by the Biden administration, and specifically here, Jack Smith, the judge throwing the flag on it, going, you're going to need to explain yourself here. What is going on? Now, in addition, I want to take you to a flashback to March of this year, where the federal judge here in Washington, D.C., Beryl Howell, ruled that prosecutors who were overseeing the investigation into Donald Trump and his handling of documents, the New York Times said the judge ruled that they can pierce attorney-client privilege. You just heard Mark Levin talking about this. So Donald Trump's attorney-client privilege rights have been destroyed here. In other words, the attorneys have to be compelled to testify against their own client because of what this judge Beryl Howell did here in D.C. In making her ruling, the judge, Beryl Howell, found that the government had met the threshold for a special provision of the law known as the crime fraud exception. That provision allows prosecutors to work around attorney-client privilege when they have reason to believe that legal advice or legal services have been used in furthering a crime. The New York Times reported last month, that would have been February, that prosecutors had asked Judge Howell to apply the crime fraud exception to the grand jury testimony of Evan Corcoran, a lawyer who has represented Mr. Trump since last spring. As the documents investigation began heating up, Mr. Corcoran in recent months appeared before the grand jury and asserted attorney-client privilege while declining to answer certain questions. Obviously, as his attorney, he's not compelled to, until Judge Howell got involved. Attorney-client privilege is a bedrock legal principle designed to protect private communications between lawyers and those they represent, the New York Times said with a straight face. Judge Howell's ruling, issued under seal, that the crime fraud exception applies in this case, is important because it places the imprimatur of a federal judge on prosecutors' contention that Mr. Corcoran's legal work may have been used in the commission of a crime. Judge Beryl Howell helped push along this violation of Donald Trump's rights. Judge Beryl Howell, it's worth noting, is also very close to all sorts of anti-Trump ghouls, including Andrew Weissman, once known as Bob Mueller's pit bull, the man who sought to take down the Trump presidency. That's the type of people that Beryl Howell runs around with. Amazing. So, yeah, that's what you're seeing happen today. It's good. Once again, you get a judge every so often, whether it's the judge in Missouri standing up for free speech rights and saying, hey, the Biden administration can't censor everyone. Stop it. Stop censoring people by way of the social media companies. That judge is paying attention to our rights, doing his job as a judge. Maybe it's the judge who's hearing the Hunter Biden plea deal, who's going, what is happening here? You're going to give him blanket immunity, and you're going to do it in a separate document that you say I'm not allowed to rule on? Let's hit the brakes, and she did. Amazing. That whole thing blew up. And now Judge Eileen Cannon saying, you're going to need to explain yourself. What is happening here? Where you're using this out-of-district grand jury, which I just told you, she doesn't say this, but she's obviously implying this point, the one that you heard Mark Levin bring up, which is you're breaking Trump's attorney-client privilege with a grand jury and a judge in D.C., and then you're dumping it in Florida at that moment after that's already done? How does this work exactly? So fascinating stuff that's happening as they try and destroy Donald Trump yet again. Now, there's another piece of audio I want to jump to because I think it's so fascinating what's happening. This is a completely separate topic, but just as a cultural matter, something super weird is going on. There's a rapper called Neyo who is currently in the midst of controversy because he dared say that he doesn't want his child, he wouldn't let any of his children be destroyed by the transgender cult. I'm not letting my kids be absolutely savaged by irreparable damage. And that's not going to happen, said Neyo, which is, first of all, it's a common sense position, but it's amazing that it's now, it's considered like a really bold stance to take for a figure like a Neyo. And here's what he said. He says he can't believe what they allowed to happen to these kids. And this is in the course of an interview he just did recently, which the left is going crazy about.
If your little boy comes to you and says, Daddy, I want to be a girl, and you just let him rock with that, you just let him.
Right.
He's 5.
Right. And where did he get that
if
from?
If you let this 5-year-old boy decide to eat candy all day, he's going to do that.
Exactly.
Like, when did it become a good idea to let a 5-year-old, let a 6-year-old, let a 12-year-old make a life-changing decision for themselves?
Right.
When did that happen?
Right.
Like, I don't understand that. I don't get that.
And to medicate these young kids that are 5, 6, growing up and knowing that it affects their brain, it affects their organs, it makes them sick, but they're not allowed to do drugs, they're not allowed to do alcohol.
Right.
We can medicate them up.
He can't drive a car yet, but he can decide his sex.
Right, right. What sexual orientation, and you can cut off his pee-pee, and that, to me, that makes no sense whatsoever.
And I don't know if this is true, but I heard a rumor that they either passed or are trying to pass a law in LA that states if your child comes to you and asks to do some of these things and you say no, they can take your kid from you.
Yeah, that's true. It just passed in California.
It's amazing. So there's Neyo. Doesn't he sound like a common sense person? No, I don't know any of his other views on anything. I'm just saying that particular point is totally common sense. It's the kind, we're all kind of nodding in agreement. Yeah, of course, he's right on the money. He's right on the money. Now, Neyo is a very popular, famous singer. So on Sunday evening, last night, all of a sudden a statement appeared on his Twitter account, and it said this. It was written, it was just, you ever see one of these statements? It's always like an apology statement where it's just a picture and then the text is written out in long form. After much reflection, I'd like to express my deepest apologies to anyone that I may have hurt with my comments on parenting and gender identity. I've always been an advocate for love and inclusivity in the LGBTQI+ community, so I understand how my comments could have been interpreted as insensitive and offensive. Gender identity is nuanced, and I can honestly admit that I plan to better educate myself on the topic. Yada, yada, yada. This is like Chinese Cultural Revolution garbage. Now, after that statement went up, a bunch of normal people were like, why are you apologizing for saying something normal? Why are you doing that? And so within the last 2 hours, Neyo has released another video, this time basically slamming, I guess, the PR people who wrote that statement. And he's doubling down on his original position. Listen.
What's going on, loved ones? This is Neyo. All right, listen. I normally don't give too much of a damn about what y'all think about what I do, what y'all have to say about what I say, whatever. I normally don't care because, like I said, opinions ain't special. Everybody got one. However, this is something I feel very strongly on, and I need y'all to hear this from the horse's mouth, not the publicist's computer. So check this out. First and foremost, I do not apologize for having an opinion on this matter. I am a 43-year-old heterosexual man raising 5 boys and 2 girls, okay? That's my reality. Now, if my opinion offended somebody, yeah, sure, I apologize for you being offended because that wasn't my intention. My intention is never to offend anybody. However, I'm entitled to feel how I feel. I'm absolutely entitled to feel how I feel the same way you are entitled to feel how you feel. I ain't asked nobody to follow me. I ain't asked nobody to agree with me.
That's right.
I was asked a question, and I answered the damn question, okay? I have no beef with the LGBTQIA+ community whatsoever. I ain't got no beef with y'all. Do whatever the hell it is you want to do. Do what you want to do with your kids. However, somebody asked my opinion on this matter, and this is how I feel. I will never be okay with allowing a child to make a decision that detrimental to their life. I will never be okay with that. I don't care. I definitely plan to educate myself a little bit more on this matter. However, I doubt that there's any book anywhere or any opinion that somebody's going to tell me that's going to make me okay with letting a child make a decision like that. That's just period, point blank, and that's how I feel.
He's right.
If I get canceled for this, then you know what? Maybe this is a world where they don't need a Neyo no more, all right? And I got no problem with that. I'm a hustler, all right? I'll figure it out. I got kids to raise, and I'm going to do that regardless. So with that being said, y'all have a good day. I love everybody. Live how you want to live, love how you want to love, but your opinion is yours. Speak your opinion as much as you damn well feel like it. Because as I said, they're not important, they're not special. Everybody got one, and you're entitled to it. I'm entitled to mine. All right? Y'all feel how y'all want to feel.
Good for him.
Have a great day. It's Neyo. Peace and love.
That's right. That's right. Stand by that opinion. I'm glad to hear him come out. And you heard him basically say that, whatever some publicist is going to post, I'll tell you the truth about how I feel about this. Now, it's a little crazy to say that other kids should be mutilated. He shouldn't say that. If you want to do it, no, that's stupid. Your original opinion is right. Don't let it happen to your kids. Nobody's going to convince you otherwise because there's no meaningful way. There's no reasonable way to convince you that a kid should be mutilated. That's just idiotic. So you said maybe the world don't need Neyo no more. No, we need more Neyo. We need more people who are just like Neyo, speaking up, speaking common sense, and not being cowed by the ghouls that are in that industry or anywhere else for that matter. Donald Trump taking all these indictments in stride. Here he is on Friday in Alabama.
They wanted to wait, and they did wait. They waited right to the middle of an election, and they waited until I became the dominant force in the polls because we're dominating everybody, including Biden in the polls. And then they filed them all, every one of them, all at essentially one time, including local DAs and AGs and even other cases right in the middle of the campaign.
Of course.
Where we're leading by so much, and that's not going to make any impact because every time they file an indictment, we go way up in the polls. We need one more indictment to close out this election.
Yeah, there's Trump saying, bring them on, baby. All they're doing is helping me. He's got a point. We'll keep tracking the weather here on WMAL. Stay with us as this storm makes its way through the D.C. area. And don't miss the excellent analysis and program from our good friend, the great one, Mark Levin, up next here on WMAL.